Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us for this webinar. I'm going to speak to you today about some key travel trends among wealthy consumers, focusing on inbound travel into the Middle East in particular. To quickly introduce Altiant, we collect quantitative marketing research data for dozens of the world's most iconic luxury and financial service brands. We operate in over 15 key luxury markets by utilising our own community of over 10,000 affluent and high net worth individuals, all of whom we manually validate to be sure of their wealth. So a quick run through the agenda for the webinar today. For the first 15 minutes, I would like to start by providing an overview on key luxury travel trends, which showed affluent consumers' mindset before COVID-19. This will then progress on to how consumer sentiment is evolving and how it might look after COVID. And for the final quarter of an hour, I'll then focus specifically on luxury travel into the Middle East. So there will be lots of data in this presentation, of course. Feel free to keep reusing it, and it will be available on WTM's site as well as Altiant's own website. So before we come to the data run specifically for the webinar today, I'd like to start with an overview of key luxury travel trends using data which Altiant has gathered from different global surveys we have run within the past year. This first chart shows quarterly data from our global luxury tracker called GLAM, which is free to access on our website, and you can see the URL there in the bottom corner. The GLAM tracker covers a variety of subjects: finance, cryptocurrency, investments, travel, of course, as you can see here. And in this question, we asked, how often have you purchased a luxury travel brand or service within the past year? And here you can see that travel is a highly popular part of the wealthy spending habits. Each of the 6 columns shows a different quarter with around 500 global responses in each case. And you can see that actually there is very little quarterly variation. The data in grey shows just how popular travel is. 3 in 5 took multiple vacations annually, and only around 15% or so on average do not engage with luxury travel brands or services at all. In the penultimate column, you can see there was no significant change in Q1 2020, but we are starting to see some change in the Q2 2020 results. Obviously, those are not quite completed yet, but there is that nudge upwards slightly from 14% to 19% for no purchases, and that might creep up a little bit further for the rest of this year and potentially beyond due to coronavirus. However, we can see that travel is a resilient and core part of the way wealthy people spend their money, and this should help the industry to bounce back. So let's look at what affluent people do while they're on their vacations. This chart is also taken from the GLAM tracker and reports the data as per Q1 2020. So while this was taken before the COVID outbreak, it's reasonable to assume that these will remain popular activities after, and some, such as private transport, might become even more appealing. We can see that many wealthy travellers are looking for a holistic luxury experience, almost from when they leave home to when their vacation ends. So they're looking for luxury from travelling to where they stay to what they actually do when they're on their travels. We then focused in on some of these key luxury travel trends using our global sample. We found that the significant majority prefer new experiences over those they might have had before. They like to explore the local area and immerse themselves in local culture. They like to visit lesser known locations, although a third or so prefer those popular locations, the tourist hotspots and hubs. And 2/3 prefer places which speak a foreign language. So getting outside of their comfort zone language-wise, which tells us that many of the world's wealthy are looking to broaden their horizons and experience new things. Moving on, 2/3 prefer vacations to be a time to relax and spoil themselves and switch off from modern day stresses. Meanwhile, a third or so preferred vacations to detox and improve their mental or physical health, and 35% there prefer active vacations. So activities such as yoga or golf could appeal to many. Wellness is a big trend within luxury travel and is already popular among our global sample. Women are more likely than men to have previously taken a wellness vacation. That's 55% versus 43% respectively. And there's also quite a high degree of satisfaction and repeat purchasing from those who have already taken wellness trips. Meanwhile, a third told us they've never taken one before, but are interested in doing so. And it seems likely that wellness holidays will continue to grow in popularity as people look to de-stress following COVID-19. Over the past few months, Altiant has been tracking our wealthy consumers' sentiment towards the effects of COVID-19 and potential returns to normality. This data is again accessible to all on our website, the link there in the bottom right-hand corner. This data set covers 4 countries, as you can see, UK, US, France, and China, and 3 waves of data in March, April, and the middle of June. As you can see, in France, the UK, and the US in particular, there is growing confidence that the worst of the health effects are in the past, and consumers are starting to look forwards towards the future. You'll notice that dip there in China from 78% to 70%. That's a possible reflection of localized outbreaks, which China had been seeing around the middle of June, certainly in key cities such as Beijing. Also in this data set, around 50 to 60% of our affluent respondents in each country said that they have been negatively impacted financially by COVID-19. That's highest among Brits at 56%. So even the most wealthy are feeling the impacts, and it's therefore potentially something we'll see more in the coming months, that behaviours are going to change as a result. Let's look in a bit more detail now at how these overarching data points from wealthy travellers might evolve after COVID-19. For this next section, I'm going to show some data which we ran in the last week of May from a survey of almost 500 respondents in the UK, US, and France. As you can see, it was broadly balanced evenly on gender and age, and the median household income was $372,000 when all currencies were converted into US. So we're really here talking about the top 1 to 2% affluence in each of those countries. In a general sense, the COVID outbreak does appear to have led many people to consider how they lead their lives, and we could see some fundamental behavioural shifts in the next few years. 37% say that the pandemic has led them to question their consumption of luxury goods, and some brands could suffer if this mentality becomes more widely popular. As you can see in the top bar, almost half think they will remain brand loyal after COVID-19. That 52% did not think they will remain brand loyal, though, could be an opportunity to attract new customers. Specifically to travel, just over a third of our samples say they plan to travel less in the future, rising to 38% among over 40s. Though it's important to caveat this result as being at a singular point of time at the height of fears around coronavirus. So it's very possible that that number could wane as and when COVID-19 retreats. Sustainability is likely to be one of the key facets behind this figure, which once again highlights how important it is for travel operators to embrace this issue with integrity and commitment. For example, some people are cutting back on unnecessary and frivolous flights as a result of greater consideration of how their lives impacts the world around them. For airlines, for example, this could mean continual investments into biofuels and more advanced flight planning systems. Elsewhere in this survey, 32% of our sample told us they will be putting more emphasis on sustainably produced luxury products in the future. So this subject is clearly becoming more important to many and something which they're actively researching about before making purchases from companies. Here are some direct quotes from our survey respondents reflecting this expectation for many to consider cutting back on luxury spending in the immediate future. Many of our respondents say they have even adjusted to not spending so freely while they are in lockdown, and they've realized that actually their wealth may not be as important to them as they had thought. A recent study from the company Opportunity Insights found that the richest consumers in the US have actually cut back the most since the spread of COVID, and that's reflected in some of the quotes you can see here. Now, of course, this is certainly not intended to paint a depressing or a pessimistic picture, but it's instead a rational reflection that many affluent consumers are in the midst of reassessing their wealth and how it fits into their lives in the future. We asked our panel, assuming lockdown has been lifted and travel companies start to offer their services again to certain countries, how likely are you to consider international travel? And we are now seeing countries relaxing border requirements as they attempt to stimulate their economies via tourism. But there remains quite a degree of uncertainty around when it is actually safe and convenient for people to travel again. However, it is clear that the intention to travel is there, with 2/3 saying they're ready to travel again post-lockdown. Among the people who say they are very likely to travel, Brits are the most likely to state this at 39%, while the result rises to 42% among men compared to only 28% of women. The remaining third of the sample, there in the grey and the light blue segments, they're a little bit more conservative and say that they are unlikely to travel internationally as soon as lockdown is lifted. So it could be later this year or even further beyond before these people start to consider international travel again. Certainly that 16% segment there will take quite a lot of convincing before they start to travel internationally. Looking at this travel intention in a bit more detail, almost half of our sample say they will book a general holiday as soon as possible, while 22% say they're ready to book a wellness retreat. As mentioned earlier, wellness could be an increasingly key part of travel in the coming years as people look to de-stress following COVID-19. In both cases, the French were the most reticent of the 3 countries surveyed to be ready to travel after lockdown measures are eased. If we move to the bottom bar, we can see that 1 in 5 say they will book business travel as soon as possible. That rises to 27% among Americans. That's the highest of all 3 countries. Over the past few months, many of us have shifted business models and are acting remotely more often. While this necessity has been effective for some, many affluent and high net worth individuals do still see the value of at least some face-to-face business. And building on this further, there does appear to be a degree of conservatism and caution in spending terms for the immediate future. We asked, assuming all are available to you, how much do you think you will spend on the following after COVID-19 compared to before? So we have 5 categories: hotel and resort stays, short haul flights for leisure, long haul, short haul flights for business, and long haul. If we look at the orange and blue segments, we see an expected reduction in spending, either much less or a little less, while the red and the blue bars show an increase. As you can see, in all 5 categories for hotels and hotel stays and flights, around 2 in 5 expect to spend about the same. That's the grey segments there in the middle. However, the overriding net sentiment is downwards, which indicates that many wealthy consumers are likely to be circumspect with their travel spending in the immediate future. Particularly for longer haul travel, there were several comments expressing concerns about not being able to return home if new outbreaks did happen. Distancing and removal from crowds are likely to remain popular ways of taking holidays, even when lockdown restrictions are lifted. The cruise industry is one which will have a particularly tough challenge post-COVID, especially larger ships which may have hundreds or even thousands of passengers. On the other hand, private travel experiences, such as private yachts, should be less impacted and may see good growth, as many wealthy travellers view space as even more of a luxury. Again, this data is not intended to paint a pessimistic picture, but merely to manage expectation that even among the wealthy, many will still be conservative with their travel spending in the immediate future. And as such, cautious optimism is probably a good mindset at the moment. So what could encourage people to travel again? We asked which of the following measures would make people feel comfortable about resuming flying or hotel stays. Here you can see the top 4 factors which hotels and airlines could use to make this comfort and reassurance about traveling again. As you might expect, there's quite a degree of overlap between the 2 columns, but to briefly summarize, it's all about high hygiene standards, social distancing, and staff wearing PPE. Many airlines and hotels are communicating the investments they have made to try to reassure travelers that it's safe for them to start taking holidays again. Interestingly, these measures do show a degree of variance when we break them down by age, gender, and country. For example, men are more likely than women to want health checks, and Americans are the most likely of the 3 countries to want strict cleaning protocols. Again, get in touch if you'd like to see more of this data. There were about 10 options for each category here. We've only shown the top 4 on the slide. So we've seen now how luxury travel should see an immediate uplift post-lockdown, although about a third of affluent consumers are reassessing their luxury purchases, and that includes travel. It's going to be a very competitive market to secure these bookings. The brands and regions should be speaking to consumers now to understand their mentality and how they plan to act once it's safe to travel again. And this perceived safety might in fact fluctuate For example, a few days ago, Germany and Israel reported big spikes in their R numbers, and they were localized outbreaks. Reassuring travellers and being flexible with bookings and potential refunds will be key in the coming months. We're now going to turn to luxury travel into the Middle East as one such region which will be competing for this spend as a luxury holiday destination. For this section, we ran a survey in February 2020. This was with a view to presenting at the sadly cancelled Arabian Travel Market in Dubai in April. As such, some of the results will need this bearing in mind, but in fact, most of the data here should be equally applicable and true independent of the impact of COVID-19. So in this case, as I say, the survey was run in February 2020, 100 respondents in the UK and the US, broadly balanced by age and gender, and the household income median was almost $350,000. So again, the top 1 to 2% wealth. Firstly, some brief context. Tourism in the Middle East had continued to rise and reached 64 million international arrivals in 2019, according to data from the UNWTO. That represented an encouraging 10% growth in numbers over the 3-year period, and it is still feasible that the Middle East could outstrip Africa within the next decade. Global events such as the rescheduled 2021 World Expo in Dubai will continue to boost knowledge of the region internationally and attract more visitors. And sporting events such as the 2022 Football World Cup in Qatar will also put the global spotlight firmly on the region. Many Middle Eastern countries are seeing strong growth in tourism via new visa schemes, easing entry to visitors from many countries worldwide. And there are also now, additionally, new key international flight routes into countries such as Oman, which are having a clear and immediate positive impact. 2020 will obviously be a year in which all regions see tourism drop significantly as we fight the coronavirus outbreak. It remains unclear how long this will last, and in fact, which regions will be the quickest to respond once lockdown restrictions are lifted. So let's move on to the consumer data. Firstly, we asked our sample where they had taken luxury leisure vacations within the past 2 years. As expected, affluent Brits and Americans are most likely to take luxury travel holidays within their own continents, so Europe and North America at the top. Specifically to the Middle East, 62% had not travelled to the region for leisure within the past 2 years. That was 67% of Americans. And the Middle East actually remains more popular among Brits of these two countries, both as a place to live and as a holiday destination. And indeed, 20% of Brits had taken 2 or more leisure trips to the region within the past 2 years. Looking a bit more at travel into the region, we can see that satisfaction among visitors is high. Almost half of our sample said that they had visited within the past 2 years for either leisure or business. And encouragingly, almost all said that they were interested in returning. Only 4% said they were not. So this is a very powerful finding, which shows how enjoyable travellers find the region, and they're a strong driver for repeat visits. Still looking at this 48% here who had visited within the past 2 years. Of this number, 78% said they had stayed in one destination or a country, whereas 22% said they had travelled around the region, suggesting there may be scope for national tourist boards to work together in some cases. And you can see here, there is also considerable scope to entice new visitors. 35% of those had not visited the region were interested in doing so. It's hard to be certain what that number would be post-COVID-19, but it seems reasonable to assume that there would still be broadly similar interest in the region once it's safe to travel again. Only 17% said they had not visited and were not interested in doing so. So that's a very encouraging number to build upon for the region. The Middle East has successfully positioned itself as a desirable location to take a leisure holiday and to do business. Prior to the outbreak, 3/4 of our sample said they had planned to visit the region in 2020, as shown here in the dark blue, red and grey segments. So that 75% represents a clear step up from the 48% who we just saw said they had previously visited, and it points towards many people converting their interest in visiting the region into action, or rather that had been the plan before COVID. Again, we think this interest should return once it is safe to travel internationally. And when these travellers come to the Middle East, many of them do spend big. This chart shows all responses converted into US dollars. On their last visit, only 10% spent less than $5,000, while 43% spent more than $10,000. And if we think back to the beginning, the median household income of this sample was almost 350K. So the Middle East is proving to be a good place for affluent travellers to spend their considerable disposable income. So which brands do these consumers, potentially spend their money with? When we asked our sample which luxury travel companies originating in the region came to mind first, Emirates was the comfortable leader for spontaneous awareness. Two of the other leading carriers from the region also secured a respectable number of unprompted mentions. Perhaps, as expected, the larger airlines and hotel chains led the way for mentions here. While awareness obviously doesn't always carry through to actual transactions, it is a key metric for securing business, and it does provide us with a useful indicator. We then asked which of the following places our affluent and British and American respondents would be most interested in travelling to as of February 2020. Here you can see the United Arab Emirates performing strongly overall. Dubai was cited as being of most interest. 2/3 listed it as appealing, while 68% of the sample said it would be their top destination of all of those you can see on the screen. No other venue even reached double figures for being ranked as their #1 destination. So it tells us that at the moment, Dubai is the clear favourite among affluent British and American travellers. The rescheduled World Expo next year should help to further boost the international profile of Dubai. Abu Dhabi follows in second place at 40%, though only 8% said it was their favourite option of all of those listed on screen. And it's often in second place behind Dubai. There is scope to further promote tourism into Abu Dhabi and indeed the other Emirates, such as Sharjah and Fujairah, as 19% are interested in visiting these. Here you can also see strong competition among the other locations. Other Gulf countries such as Jordan, Oman and Saudi Arabia interest around 1 in 5 of our sample, so there's plenty of scope for further growth if these countries can continue to increase awareness and appeal to international travellers. Schemes such as Saudi Arabia's initial $4 billion tourism development fund are a great way for countries such as these to develop international tourism further. Encouragingly, only 21% of the sample said they were not interested in visiting the Middle East at all. When we asked our sample to describe the region as a holiday destination, you can see many positive attributes were cited. It is seen as an exotic, exciting and memorable place for the wealthy to take their holidays. And it's also able to cater to a wide variety of interests via the range of venues and services available. However, we should note there are some clear areas for improvement in the coming years, such as for being seen as family friendly, safe and romantic. If we look at the least cited factor, affordability at 7%, that doesn't actually need to be a negative finding. And indeed, if the region wants to position itself as a luxurious venue, which is not geared towards mass tourism, then actually adopting a reassuringly expensive position is a positive. When associating these attributes with different Middle Eastern destinations, Dubai was the overwhelming leader and most cited for evoking almost all of the attributes. Israel and Turkey were other strong performers on many metrics, and they benefited from links to beach holidays and having many activities available. But it's worth caveating that Dubai's high scores may be in part due to it being the most visited location within the region, and that obviously helps our respondents have very clear associations with what Dubai offers. Meanwhile, these visitors, these travellers might be less familiar with what countries such as, for example, Oman and Lebanon can offer, and indeed what they stand for. So there are clear opportunities here for some countries to develop and reinforce their images in travellers' minds, potentially offering points of difference from their neighbours. When we asked our respondents which of the following reasons they came to the Middle East for in the past 2 years, we can see a wide variety were mentioned. Sightseeing tops the list, 59%. And of course, the Middle East has a wide variety of sites, from the Burj Khalifa in Dubai to Petra in Jordan, many, many others, of course. Beach holidays and adventure and activity holidays also appeal to many, both of which are readily available in many countries throughout the Middle East. Travellers are also attracted by the variety of other activities and sites that the region now has to offer. That ranges from fine dining to luxury shopping. Dubai is innovating in this area in particular. For example, it's due to open a new retail complex called Commerce City for online operators by 2023. And it's also investing in fine dining. But of course, dining will need reinvention in the age of COVID. As we saw right near the beginning of the webinar, we found in our previous research that fine dining is the most popular activity on leisure holidays, appealing to 70% of our global sample. So having a variety of top-end restaurants can be an extra advantage when looking to attract wealthy international travellers. In the short term, at least, it will be important for venues to be able to ensure social distance and reassure diners that they are dining in safety, while still providing appealing dining experiences. The Middle East is also ideally located to tap into the ongoing growth of wellness holidays, something which 22% of our sample had already experienced within the region. And finally, high-profile events such as the Bahrain Grand Prix and the 2022 Football World Cup in Qatar should help to boost the share of sporting visitors higher still than its current level of 13%. And finally, we should also consider reasons why people might not travel to the Middle East or from doing so more often. Earlier, we saw that only 17% of affluent travellers in the UK and the US had neither visited the region nor were interested in doing so within the next year. That was irrespective of the coronavirus pandemic. Clearly, many travellers will remain cautious and conservative for the rest of this year and probably beyond, but it's still useful to see which factors were deterring them prior to the outbreak. Reassuring travellers about their safety and security appears to be key to boosting American and British visits to the Middle East. 3 in 5 say they are worried about these factors. The early stages of COVID-19 largely accounts for the 33% who said they were deterred due to health concerns. On this basis, and in normal times, this number would be quite a lot lower. Countries such as the United Arab Emirates have in fact been praised by the World Health Organization for how they are dealing with COVID-19. So communicating achievements such as these will be very effective in reassuring travellers of their safety. And finally, educating travellers and helping them understand the local customs such as alcohol consumption and cultural norms could also be effective in boosting visits, as around a quarter told us they're deterred from visiting on these grounds. So here are 3 key takeaways from the data portion of the whole webinar. Firstly, many affluent consumers are now reassessing the importance of their money and how it fits into their lifestyles. What worked for brands before COVID in attracting customers may no longer do so in the future. Secondly, reassurance and best-in-class standards are necessary to convince people that it's safe again to travel. So the onus here is now firmly on travel companies to provide that reassurance for travellers. And finally, wellness and privacy are likely to be key travel trends post-COVID, enabling travellers to recharge and de-stress. So that concludes the webinar, which we hope you found to be interesting and useful. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or would like to discuss this data or any of your other research requirements, then please do get in touch via one of the email addresses shown. We hope you stay well and wish your businesses all the best in navigating these challenging times. Thank you for listening.